Welcome back, everyone, to FF Plus, your outlet for weekly reviews that are simple, short, and spoiler-free. As always, I'm your host, Aaron White. But for this episode, I'm not alone. Here with me for this week's review of the newest, much-anticipated Tom Cruise spy adventure, and then what is sure to be a challenging series ranking afterward, is my friend and fellow Seattle film critic, Nick Tiffany.
How you doing, Aaron?
Good, man. This is exciting. I am thrilled to be able to talk about something with you finally. Been to some movies together now, and I wanted to just get a chance to do this online for once, and then also to kind of give some people who are listening to my show the opportunity to learn about you, and maybe even me to learn about you a little bit, I would say. You have been doing this longer than I have, in reality, like as far as you started before I did, right? When did you begin being a film critic?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it goes back to 2012.
Wow.
I want to say I'm a sophomore in high school at the time. I have no concept of film criticism to a deep level, no idea about press screenings, any of this kind of stuff. But our good family friend, Mike Ward of shouldiseeit.net, just a masterful, wonderful man. He knew I had a liking for Quentin Tarantino and Tarantino films. So out of nowhere, around my birthday, kind of early December, he's like, "Hey, would you and your dad want to go to an early screening of Django Unchained?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, you're gonna go see that like 2 weeks early? What is this?" And he's like, "Yeah, and I can bring a couple people if you want to go." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll go with you. That'd be great." And so we go, and, you got to get there 45 minutes early. But, I mean, for 45 minutes before the film started, I was just soaking in all this conversation from most of the film critics who are still here in the Seattle area, too. But just shooting the breeze, talking shop, talking about all sorts of my favorite films, getting an entire index of movies that I was going to have to go and watch to understand some of what I was going to be seeing in Django. It was like a playground. It was like this just incredibly rich and nourishing environment. And I mean, after watching Django as well for your first press screening, I was hooked. How could I not be?
Yeah, that's amazing.
And so shortly after that, my dad helped me kind of set up a WordPress blog site, and it's like, all right, you know what, I'm just going to write reviews for myself for now just to kind of get better. And I'd go with Mike to 1 or 2 movies a week, sometimes covering for him if he couldn't make it. And after probably 6 months to a year, kind of got credentialed on my own. So then I could start bringing some people and started doing a lot more video reviews, kind of like the video on demand type stuff, getting to do talent interviews as well, covering film festivals. And so, I went from not knowing this world exists to like, how deep does the rabbit hole go in this world and profession?
That's a really cool story. I think it's a lot like most of us in many ways. I mean, it's very similar. It is very eye-opening. I love how you described that moment, because for people who may be listening and do this for fun and a hobby, just like we have always done, we would be doing now if we didn't have credentials. It is like that when you are sitting in your first press screening and you're surrounded by what you immediately understand are your people. They all think like you. They all obsess over movies in the way that you do. And it's just this natural place of joy. It's kind of like you're in the Nicole Kidman ad for a second, where you all are there for the same reason, and it's special, and it is addictive. It is immediately you're like, I gotta come back. This is where I need to be. And so you were in Seattle film critic world for a long time. I came in middle to the late 2016, and I think you were like on your way out, essentially.
Yeah, I was down in Houston at the time. I was going to the University of Houston there. And at the time, studying acting with a focus in theater and performance. And as so it goes in college, I was able to do a good amount of this reviewing for a while. I was writing for the school paper, covering different film festivals like the South by Southwest Film Festival in Austin a couple times, which was tons of fun. But between school, working, and then moving back up here, and then eventually finishing through Eastern, studying, school time, and work just kind of took over. And it was like, I could try and do all three, and I'd be really stretching myself thin. And I was kind of of the mindset that I'm like, I need to get done with school. I need to finish. I need to buckle down. And, I was working a job I enjoyed too. So, working and making money, it was like, hey, this is pretty great as well. But, I'm working mostly nights that all the film screenings would be. So it was kind of like this, is this what it is to be an adult now? I've got to be responsible and kind of put things on hold for a little and do the real life stuff for a bit. And then, years went by, unfortunately. And sometime last year, post-pandemic, I'd kind of started getting back in the theater again. And it was like, okay, I really, really miss this feeling. Kind of started podcasting a little at the end of last year. And then it wasn't until, I think, end of April or maybe the end of March when you'd reached out to me to go check out Air. And I mean, it was just like the first time. It was like, dude, I'm back. I'm like, this is the world I'm meant to belong in. And it also was just like, it felt like no time had passed. Seeing some of the same people, it was like everybody looks the same. They're all still talking about the same stuff. And so it was just, it's come full circle. But it's really, really awesome to be back, just doing this in any capacity.
It's a cool story. So you're podcasting, you're putting out a ton of stuff, by the way. You came back with a vengeance. Don't burn out, please. But yeah, so your podcasting is, and you have a website, right? Do you want to mention what that is?
Yeah. So it's pretty, I'm trying to think of the right word. It's nicktiffany.com. It's a little on the nose, but it's Nick Tiffany's movie reviews. So doing podcasting, hosted on all the main platforms, but nicktiffany.com was always kind of the landing site for reviews, interviews, and all that kind of stuff. And so part of stepping away from this too was egged on by kind of losing the domain name for a while, corrupted WordPress, losing hundreds of reviews, and then just kind of saying, you know what, it's better to just delete it, move on, and maybe start from scratch again. And so kind of been rebuilding, so to speak. And it's been fun, but it's been such like an addicting process as well, because I'm sure like you, it's like, okay, I'm just trying to tweak every little thing. I'm like, I don't know how like that search box looking there. I'm like, let's try to move that down if I could truncate this. And so it's been a lot of work, but it's all been pretty enjoyable. I can't remember the last time I've spent like 8 hours a day just throughout the day coding little bits here and there and trying to perfect, okay, how does this look on the iPad here, on the mobile phone here? But no, it's been awesome. It's been really fun to kind of get back into it and learning the podcast side of this, because I'm trying to think of how many years I've been in the Feelin Film group on Facebook now. Sometimes as an observer, sometimes as a commenter, often as a listener. And so when you'd reached out, it was kind of like, oh, I was like, I've been following this guy for a little while now. It's like, there's like these like micro celebrities within the film critic space. And so it was like, oh, cool. But I'm like, and your naval ties was something where, my dad being in the Navy and growing up with some of that knowledge, I was just like, this dude, you're a Razorbacks fan. So, I'm like pretty well-rounded individual. So it was like, all right, I'm going to chomp at the bit to shoot the breeze with him and, just get to know him better and kind of learn some of this space as well.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate all that, man. That's very nice of you. So we're glad to have you. I just wanted to kind of get a quick history of you and put your work out there for people so they know where they can find it. We'll mention it again at the end of the episode, listeners, so you can write it down if you need to, or go subscribe right now so you don't forget. That would be the ideal way to do it. But we're here to talk about a movie, so let's get into that now. This is Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1 from Paramount Pictures. It stars Tom Cruise, Haley Atwell, Ving Rhames, Simon Pegg, Rebecca Ferguson, Vanessa Kirby, Esai Morales, Palm Clementieff, Muriela Garriga, Henry Cerny, Shea Wiggum, Greg Tarzan Davis, Charles Parnell, Frederick Schmidt, Carrie Ells, Mark Gatiss, Indira Varma, and Rob Delaney. It is directed by Christopher McQuarrie. It was written by McQuarrie and Eric Jendresen, and is based on the Mission Impossible TV series created by Bruce Geller. Cinematography is by Fraser Taggart, music by Lauren Balfe, and it is edited by Eddie Hamilton. Runs 163 minutes and is rated PG-13. What's it about? Ethan Hunt and his IMF team must track down a dangerous weapon before it falls in the wrong hands. That generic enough for you? I hope so. We're going to actually explain what that dangerous weapon is, because all of these movies revolve around essentially tracking down a dangerous weapon before it falls in the wrong hands, it feels like, for the most part. So, yeah, we're not going to spoil any major plot beats, but we are going to kind of express what the plot entails, as otherwise it would be very hard to tell you our feelings on it. With that being said, this movie opens with a set piece that, it's funny, Nick, that you just mentioned my naval background. This movie has a nuclear submarine, a Russian nuclear submarine, and it has a very reminiscent feel to Hunt for Red October to me, the way that the movie started off. And it sort of sets up essentially what is going to be a story about a rogue AI. And I hope I'm wetting your whistles, listeners, because this is a really cool intro piece, in my opinion. And I was locked into this, man. I don't know about you, but I thought it was a fantastic way to get us into this world of Dead Reckoning. And it explains kind of what the title's about, too.
Absolutely. I think anytime a movie kind of starts separate from all the actors always kind of intrigues me, especially when it's sort of a lengthy intro, certainly laying all the different groundwork and going through some of the procedural submarine basics, whether it's locking missiles, loading the actual torpedoes themselves, so many things that it takes you through, kind of showcasing not just the strength of these submarines, but the ingenuity, especially with this special technology. And so very earlier on, you realize, like, okay, this is something unique. This is really impressive and kind of quite dangerous, what this sub could be capable of with this technology. And so it kind of sets a really eerie, like, you're not really certain what is real or how you can be manipulated in different ways in this digital age. I thought, like you said, Hunt for Red October, I mean, it was a really gripping and really interesting start to the movie.
Yeah, you mentioned there's no Mission Impossible actors in this whole, like, 15-minute or so, it feels like, opening. And it's a little bit of a wild, cold open, because part of me, while I was engaged, I was wondering, like, okay, where's Tom Cruise? Is he going to pull off a mask in this submarine or something? Like, is something going to happen here? But that's not the route it goes, right? It's establishing this AI that is going to be the major antagonist of the film in a big way. That sounds wild. So I want to, like, kind of get at how we thought about this from a big plot perspective. The idea is that there's an AI that wants control of everything, wants to essentially run the world, and it is utilizing old human agency human operatives to do its bidding. That is the best way that I can describe it. People that are aligned with the AI as its servants, if you will. And the way that the movie kind of ties this in is to establish the main human counterpart of Ethan Hunt as a historical enemy. So they kind of write in a backstory. Personally, I felt it was shoehorned in a way that I didn't really care for at all, and didn't think it needed to be there at all. Like, it adds some backstory here to why Ethan knows this person.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got to fight against this guy, right? Who is doing the bidding of this AI. And it's all about who is going to control the key that will essentially turn off the AI. It's the only way to get rid of it. And that's what the plot is about.
It's so interesting. Just kind of, we were talking about the AI kind of hosting or using a host. in an odd way, back in 2013 with Her, the idea of this surrogate, you'll have a computer in your head, but it's going to have,
I was
we're
okay
going
with
to
that
use
one.
the human body to kind of do, it's totally
It didn't
in a
bother me
different
nearly
direction
as
there.
much.
But it really is intriguing, because I also think of movies like Eagle Eye, which is even longer ago, with the idea of a supercomputer kind of taking over and creating all sorts of havoc and finding ways to identify an individual and try to corrupt them or corrupt what's around them. And it's really interesting how these films continuously evolve with the times, and some of the films I feel like around them, because there's a lot of ways you could kind of talk about Fast and Furious in this movie, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But I think, 2 or 3 movies ago, when AI is the big bad and cars are just slamming through the streets, and it just kind of felt ridiculous. Sometimes the AI in movies can be a little wonky. You're like, I'm an evil supercomputer, and we're going to do some crazy impossible stuff. Not that couldn't happen in the Impossible movies, but I feel like the seriousness of how they take it in Dead Reckoning really can showcase some of those implications of how quickly it is to manipulate anything from your money to identity to you name it. If it's electronic, consider it done. And you might not even know it happened.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think it does present a really unique challenge for them to face when you essentially remove any sort of digital activity. They have to go analog. My frustration came in that I didn't really see a lot of creativity in this film for how they do go about being analog. I missed the spy tech, frankly. There was nothing in here reminiscent of like the scene in Ghost Protocol where they put up this wall of that, like they move forward to make the hallways shrink. As
Such
that is amazing. There's nothing like that
Water
in
droplets.
this. Yeah, this felt to me like they almost wrote themselves into a corner to something like you truly couldn't really face off, and that took some of the enjoyment of what I like about a spy movie out of it, because it felt to me like we really leaned into masks hardcore again. Now, masks are always going to be a facet, and there are scenes in this movie. The first time that a mask is involved, in fact, which I loved, the reveal of it was brilliant. But
caught me off guard.
They just kind of keep going and going and going and going with it in this one because that's all they've got. And I felt like they leaned into the action side of this movie and the spectacle more so than the spy side. And the balance was a little off for my personal preference. Now, I say that, like, within the context, we'll kind of decide where we're going to rank it here afterwards. I love this series, and every movie in this series is, like, kind of leaps and bounds above what any other franchise is doing right now. So, like, I'm only being critical in regards to comparing it to other Mission Impossible movies, really.
It's such a unique series too, because as I was kind of prepping for our ranking, it was like, all right, I got to go back, really got to watch the first 3 Mission Impossibles, because I had next to no memory of the first 2 almost. And then Ghost Protocol I've probably seen 1 billion times, just because, Brad Bird, top to bottom, that movie's phenomenal. And when you have a new movie each time with a new director, a new cinematographer, you've got a new composer. You go from Danny Elfman to Hans Zimmer to Michael Giacchino. I don't know who've done the last 2. I just kind of keep looking through IMDb, and it's like, wow, it's almost like a whole new setup each time. And those movies feel like it tonally. Watching the first Mission Impossible, directed by Brian De Palma, I was like, wow, this has such soft tones every time someone's face is on camera. It looks older. It feels like this weathery, dreary kind of, maybe not spy thriller, but it certainly has this air of espionage or something that's a little more secretive and spy-like. And these movies have always done a pretty good job, I'd say, humor-wise as well. Not just flat-out telling jokes necessarily, but finding humor in some of those crazy, ridiculous moments. And I just felt like this film, now that this is what our third Christopher McQuarrie Mission Impossible, they really have found a great rhythm for their action. You're right. They're doing stuff that no other action series is coming close to. And for that, it's always a hats off. But as we've gone for the spectacle, it feels like we've kind of lost out on some of that group dynamic. You know, I mean, I love Benji. Simon Pegg is terrific. I always want more of him, and I think his moments with Ethan, especially in moments of duress, are really entertaining and enjoyable. And it's just one of those things where you're like, okay, this movie's almost 3 hours. So I think we could spend a little bit more time with the team, or, you know, going analog, or taking the time to try to get a little more creative with some of that. And like John Wick 4, which is also incredible, I'm like, you know, maybe a couple action sequences could have been shortened just a little bit. It just kind of, like a couple scenes just kind of go on. I mean, the action is still insane, but I was like, wow, this is a long set piece. This is a really long action piece. And, you know, I haven't heard dialogue in almost 20 minutes now, and that's fine. But coming out of the movie, it was like, okay, that was a lot of spectacle. And I kind of missed like the heart of that group dynamic a little bit, though.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, and so spectacle-wise, folks, one of my big gripes, and I say this all the time on my podcast, is that I don't mind trailers, like the first trailer for a movie, and like teaser trailers, and ones that are put out like 6 months in advance or longer. I love that because it's usually just a taste, and by the time the movie comes out, I've forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
I have a love-hate relationship with what Mission Impossible has done because it's using it as a marketing strategy. At least 2 out of the 4 big action parts of this movie, the motorcycle jump and what's called like sky racing or something. I forgot what Tom Cruise called it. He posted about it today on Twitter, but it's him with a parachute maneuvering it.
Okay.
Those are 2 of the big kind of pieces in this, and they're all over. Like, they're showing them off and explaining them in detail, like documentary style, before people get to see them. And when you see it in the movie, I just couldn't help, man, but be like, well, this would be a lot cooler when the character in the movie, like Benji in this example, is like acting surprised about what he is directing Ethan to do. But we already know the end result of it. It just takes some of the excitement out of that for me. But yes, they're incredible. And there are a couple of pieces in here that people are going to be like majorly wowed by. The climax, there's a specific video game reference that came to my head. So
I know exactly what you're at.
I was like, let's go. That's amazing. And then the car chase.
They did it better than that movie, I would say, but.
Well, it's definitely better than they did it in that movie. The other time, yes. But in the video game, it's still pretty good. But yeah, and then the car chase, which does go on for about 20 minutes, but is also in a city that compares very closely to what happens in Fast X. And my whole thought process was like, retroactively, I wanted to drop Fast X even another star rating just because I watched someone do a car chase. And I was like, you're the car movie. And this movie just did the car chase like 100 times better than the car movie. So the action's awesome. But yeah, there's some niggles. Yeah,
just a bit. There's, you know, it's really interesting because you were talking about it. It's like we've seen the entire explanation. I remember going to Avatar, The Way of Water in IMAX. And, you know, we got there early because I was like, all right, you know, we got to see the previews. I want to see that Oppenheimer teaser. I want to see certain things. And we got the, 7-minute Tom Cruise, Christopher McQuarrie, IMAX. Hey, we're doing the craziest jump of all time. And we're going to show you in detail. And we're going to show you about like 15 takes as well. Go see the movie next summer. And it was like, wow, that was just, I mean, I got goosebumps watching it. But I was like, okay, like, I guess I've kind of seen it, though. And so you're right. Come the movie time, I already knew what to expect. I knew what was coming. Not that it wasn't going to be any less awesome or as big a spectacle, but it kind of took me out a little bit. And I feel like I keep seeing films these days, this whole we're in a weird limbo right now with digital releases. Movies are coming out, and less than a week later, we're already getting behind-the-scenes footage. We're getting featurettes that are, 20, 30 minutes long. We're going to post the first 20 minutes of the movie on YouTube, and then in 2 weeks we're throwing it on digital. It's a weird world we live in, though. But we just have almost too much access to these movies right now. Because you're right, a movie's not even out 3 days before we're posting spoilers. Like, not we, but the producers, the people, they're like, we're posting spoilers now. I'm sure you all saw it yesterday, so let's go in depth and talk about da-da-da-da-da.
Exactly.
And I'm like, this is kind of too soon, I feel like. Like, give it a chance to have some legs, you know?
Yeah, let us be surprised every once in a while. I
Yes.
mean, that's one of the best
I miss that
cinematic feelings you can have. Before we go to the cast, supporting cast on the like good side, or I guess overall, I did want to let's talk about the villains. So that'll include some of them. So we have Esai Morales as the agent of the AI. I had a real problem with this, again, simply because this series, in my opinion, has given us such incredibly memorable villains, from Philip Seymour Hoffman to just most recently, like going from Henry Cavill and Sean Harris and the Syndicate and the idea of the Syndicate, and it disappears in this movie. It is not mentioned once. And I was like, I thought we were going to carry on this. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if it shows up in the next movie as like in the background but it would kind of feel forced because like they don't mention it at all. And I missed Sean Harris, and I missed like a Henry Cavill-esque character.
Something about that voice.
It just,
Ethan.
this just did not do it for me. He's very wooden on purpose. And then I will say his sidekick, played by Pom Klementieff, who is like an assassin. She almost doesn't speak at all, and she is badass, dude. She's freaking awesome in this movie. I loved her.
I enjoy her as Mantis, but this was like a complete 180. I was like, she's clearly having a great time plowing through the streets of Rome, destroying cars and just taking names. To me, watching the movie, though, and maybe it was the lack of speaking, I don't know, but I was like, I'm kind of getting Harley Quinn vibes here. And, less of a playful Harley Quinn, but maybe more so like I don't care about destroying things, and you're going to see how bad I could be. And I was like, dude, I'm kind of afraid. She's doing some acrobatic stuff, and she's just ruthless with some people, too. I was like, weirdly, I'm like, I could kind of see her as like a Harley Quinn or something like that. She surprised
I think it was the
me.
mime paint. At one point, she's wearing like white mime paint, so that probably helped you with the Harley Quinn reference.
But I'm with you about Esai. It felt forced because I'm sitting here scrambling. I'm like, did I miss something before watching this? I'm like, should I know him? Is there someone that I'm like, I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, well, everyone else kind of looks confused too. Or like, sure, he's the guy. But you're right. It felt very weak in comparison. And even with having that AI kind of team up, it was like, oh, you could be really threatening or imposing in a lot of different, maybe psychological ways or something, but it just never really turned into anything more than just, okay, well, I guess you are the servant of the bad guy, and you're just here to do its bidding to the best of your ability. But I'm with you. I didn't totally buy it, unfortunately.
If we transition sort of in between, there's like a Vanessa Kirby returning as the White Widow, as Alana, and she is another link. This movie has quite a few links to Mission Impossible 1. I don't want to reveal one of them, even though he's in the, like, his name is in the cast.
Right,
but
the marketing is putting him out there. But...
Is it? Okay, well, I'll just say this. So, well, we'll get to them. I guess they're in the middle. Vanessa Kirby is good in this. William Kittredge is back as the director of the IMF. Again, tied into this whole idea that they are really trying to backfill Mission Impossible 1 and as a prequel to how Ethan Hunt got into the IMF. And it didn't work. So I like him in this role a lot. I enjoy his scenes. Boy, does he freaking chew scenery so well. But it was hard for me to get behind narratively because it made no sense. Why would someone who was the IMF director and then disappeared out of this series for 27 years when we've had multiple other IMF directors suddenly be in charge of the IMF again? So it works in a vacuum, but it doesn't work as a connective piece in a franchise as well to me. And then for other additions or new or cast in general, like you, I just kind of wanted more from everybody. I thought this cast is phenomenal. Haley Atwell rocks. Obviously, Rebecca Ferguson people love for good reason. So it was good to have her back. You've got your Simon Pegg and your Ving Rhames. And I enjoy every time we get to do stuff with them. I think the film struggles with trying to balance the addition of Haley Atwell and her importance to this story with the returning importance of the character of Ilsa, played by Rebecca Ferguson. And it did not totally work for me in the way that they decided to handle things, simply because I felt like we started to get pretty repetitive with the way that Ethan's relationship with women have been. And it feels to me like they've been in a place now where it's like we've got to introduce a new woman every single movie for Ethan to interact with. And while that is a good way to, get a new actress and infuse more talent, it's starting to feel like we're just rotating to me. So I really enjoyed Haley Atwell, and I don't want her out of this movie, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, maybe we are reaching a good point for this to end and start over later on down the road, because we're really just recreating the wheel.
There were a lot of moments that, with this film being as long as it is too, I found myself just kind of feeling like, all right, someone would say something, or, here's the mission objective, and then someone else in the room would repeat it back. And there's this thing with movies that they do where they're like, we've got 8 powerhouse actors all in the same room, and so we're going to each have them say one line of dialogue and just kind of jump around, and it's fine for what it is sometimes, but I felt like this film kind of like, whatever the plot is, they were kind of spoon-feeding it to us sometimes. It felt like a little on the nose. It's like, well, this is what we've got to do, and it's going to be hard, and here's exactly this. And then the next character would almost just repeat that verbatim. And I was like, well, okay, well, good. I'm glad that you also understand the mission. But now we've heard it like 3 times already. And so it's like, I think we know what we're doing. And I'm with you. I like Haley Atwell, kind of like Tom Cruise. She's just got this magnetic ability with her smile, I think, that like they look good together. They work great together. One is completely frantic and the other is completely horrified and out of her world and element. But the combo worked a lot better than I had anticipated it to. But I agree. It feels like, hey, yeah, here's a new woman that we need to bring in. Ethan, you got to flirt with someone, maybe begrudgingly. But it does. It pulls you away from the characters who it feels like, all right, we've had a few movies now to get really invested in their storylines and what's going on with those relationships. And it's cool to bring someone new in, but at the sake of spending that time with the team and the family you already know, somehow the Fast and Furious franchise, for all their woes, despite having half of Hollywood in their movies, they still manage to give you little bits, or at least try to spend 5 minutes here with these two, 5 minutes here with these two. Let's at least give these 3 a scene together before some big conclusion or something like that. And so it was just missing that touch as well, I think.
Shea Wiggum was a bright spot for me. He's the one other one I wanted to mention. He plays like I don't even know, man, some sort of U.S. Special Forces person trying to hunt down Ethan.
He and Tarzan.
Yeah. That fantastic pairing. Totally. Pairing. Great. There's a buddy comedy waiting to happen with those 2 characters. And I just thought they were a real highlight in it every time they showed up.
That was the humor almost more for me. Like, that was the lightness that I was kind of looking for. And I was like, these aren't bad guys. I'm like, I like these guys. I'm like, keep up with the action. I want to see more of you. And so, and it was nice seeing there were a couple familiar Top Gun Maverick faces in this movie. Charles Parnell. As soon as he popped up and I heard his voice, I was like, yes. It's like, awesome. Glad to have you here. And then Tarzan, of course, it was like, all right, but the one thing, it's hard, because someone had asked me the other day when I'd gotten back to work the next day, and they're like, oh, you saw Mission Impossible, how does it compare to Top Gun? And I thought it was interesting, because I was like, I've been hearing mostly from people, they're like, how does it compare to Fallout? How does it compare to, the Mission Impossible movies? But, it's Tom Cruise's next big thing, and I'm like, dude, the action's out of this world. But, I think it just really speaks to the anomaly that Top Gun is, the outlier that Maverick is, because that movie truly has a bigger heart than so many independent, foreign, whatever you name it. I mean, like, that movie was something else entirely. And as much as I enjoyed this film, I was like, it was missing some of that some of that heart with those people. I'm like, you need Tom with his people.
I will talk to you some about offline because I want to ask you a question about that. There is a decided choice that is made in this movie that I think if something had happened to a different character instead, it would have amped the emotional buy-in for me in a humongous way, and it's sort of teased, but then they don't go through with it, the direction that I'm reporting. So anyway, it's not the highest emotional level of the series, and I think the series has struggled to find a balance between having an all-star cast with all these people to give time to and also find a way to make it, emotionally, riveting for us. Anything else you want to mention? I think that's most of what I had to say, but yeah, I liked it a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's always this weird anomaly, I feel like, where it's like, I really did enjoy a movie, but I know I've got some constructive criticism, let's say. And I think it's good because, these are filmmakers and people at the height of the industry who are putting out quality content like no other. And so, I respect and admire so much and enjoy what they make. And sometimes it's all right to kind of hold them to a little bit of a standard too. It's like, this was great. This is miles above most of the movies that will come out this year. That doesn't mean that you can't improve or that you can find somewhere to really kind of touch and hit home in the heart for a lot of people. So I think I've said my piece. I'm just interested now to hear your rankings.
Oh, well, we'll get to that. Yeah. So see this in IMAX. We will both tell you that.
No, definitely.
You definitely want to see it on the biggest screen possible. It will blow you away and is well worth that. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, available in theaters on July the 12th. All right. So now we're going to transition into this difficult exercise of ranking the series. And we're going to do this a little differently than just give you our individual rankings. I want us to work. Sorry. So
hey, that's all right with me.
So what we're going to do is we are going to maybe this is a mission that's impossible. No, sorry. I had to get a pun in there somewhere. We're going to start at the bottom we're going to propose or kind of put forth what we think the bottom film would be, and then we'll talk through it. Eventually we're going to meet somewhere, probably a snag where we disagree, and we'll talk it out. We'll talk about our pros, our cons, what we like about a movie, what we didn't like about a movie, and ultimately do our best to come to an agreement. And, maybe we make a deal. Maybe you give me one at a certain spot, I give you another one at a certain spot. And we'll come to our consensus, I say loosely, ranking in the end. So that's the plan.
Perfect.
With that said, what do you think is the least great of this franchise?
The least great, which is not the best. It's still good.
Unless you think it's bad. And you feel free to say it if you think it's bad.
I think the one... there's a couple that I feel like I can appreciate but didn't necessarily connect with emotionally, or maybe it's just the product of the time as well, and some of the cheesiness perhaps. I think I would have Mission Impossible 2 at the bottom. When I think of, it felt like there was a time where every show or movie, it's like, all right, there's Sentox nerve gas, there's some sort of crazy biohazard gas that's going to be brought into the city somewhere, and we're going to release this virus. And maybe it was just that I'd seen it done some other times as well, and I'm just have fonder memories of how 24, the TV show, handled it, maybe, or something to that degree. But I don't know. It's enjoyable, but watching it again a couple nights ago, it was like, okay, maybe this is why I don't totally remember it. I'm like, it was fun. It was fun. It was fine. But I kind of forgot about it not long after watching it, unfortunately.
So this is easy because I easily say Mission Impossible 2 as far as the bottom tier for me as well. Agree. It is just so much exaggeration in a series that I feel is at its best because it's mostly grounded and believable. Mm-hmm. And this one just kind of throws that out the window with style. John Woo goes for style. So you got the doves and you got the big motorcycle jump at the end and, into grabbing each other and everything exploding in the background. And it's just kind of crazy. And it's fun to watch as like a palate cleanser and a little bit of a different vibe, but there is nowhere in here that I find anything that would make it like my most rewatchable. I would not choose to revisit this one on its own. I would only revisit this one as part of a full series rewatch.
For sure.
Personally.
For sure.
So, okay, cool. So there we go. Number 2 is at the bottom. So I'll go next. Maybe we'll we'll take turn. Oh, you don't want the pressure. I see. You're wilting already. We're not even close to the top. Okay, it's just gonna get hard.
I'm playing mental math in my head right now.
All right,
where are we gonna end out?
So here's the thing. So for me, the rest of these movies are above average movies that I really, really like for various reasons. So it's a matter of like picking between children to some extent. I would propose that Mission Impossible 3 is the next worst. I hate using that terminology. Is number 6 in our rankings.
Sure.
That is what I would say. So my reasons for that are that I don't think it's the best Mission Impossible spy movie. It has the best villain in the series in Philip Seymour Hoffman. In limited screen time, he is unreal terrifying. Just absolutely phenomenal performance. It also is the most emotional of the entire series. And I know that a lot of people value that as it's like that overpowers everything else for some people to the point that it puts it first. And I kind of understand that because I'm an emotional guy. It says Feelin Film. And the reason that it's not as good of a spy movie is because they spend so much time buying into the emotional aspect of Ethan and his wife and what's going to happen and can he save her. But there's not really a problem to be solved other than that. Like they throw one in, but it's it feels forced to the point where it's
on the most wanted list. You know, he's like, a bad dude.
This is just, it's just a device to get you to where he's chasing down his wife and trying to save his wife to me. And so for me, that just doesn't jive as well with something really interesting and like in the spy world. Like I want subterfuge. I want, all this like hidden games and tricks and cool gear and stuff like that. And yeah, it's an okay supporting cast, just not by any means my strongest supporting cast either. And so that's kind of why I have to put it down there.
You know what? I think we can meet in the middle on this. I think 3 was probably going to be my number 3 in this ranking, but I can definitely get on board with that, especially talking about the idea that you're right. Most of the story just kind of serves to get you emotionally invested in Ethan's life. You spend some marital time. You see some not woes, but you understand their dynamic a little bit and what he has to hide from her. And the one thing it makes me miss, though, maybe from these newer movies, is there's that scene where they're up in the plane and he's got Philip Seymour Hoffman tied up to the bench. And
I know.
He opens up the bottom and he's like, cutting every little cutting all the zip ties one by one as he's hanging out, possibly gonna die, and Ethan's just pissed. And I love when Tom Cruise yells. He and DiCaprio and a couple others, when they yell, it's just like you do not want to be on the other end of that. And there's just some brilliant moments between the two where I'm like, I like a little more adult. I think I always kind of lean a little more heavy on, I don't want to say the violent side, but in that sense that it really does add an interesting layer to Ethan to see him taken to this point where he's almost so helpless that it's like, dude, I'm just going to beat the crap out of you if I have to, because there's nothing else I can do.
Ooh, did you say this was your number 3 overall?
Oh, sorry. You know what? No, I meant number 3 in our going backwards. It would have been my next pick.
What would you want in this spot instead of this?
It probably would be the first Mission Impossible.
Oh, no, okay. Absolutely no. I will not, dude. I was like, if it had been something else, I was thinking about trading or like accepting it, but I can't accept that.
I think we can agree that we'll go
Holy moly.
2, 3,
Okay,
That
so
works for me
so then,
to start.
so you think that okay, let me hear out your reasoning then for why you would put Mission Impossible as like the next one.
So,
The original.
watching it the other night, there is a whole heck of a lot that I really appreciate about it. Whether it's the 90s technology, some of the early Netscape browsers, so many of these little spy tools. We're going to put a camera in the bridge of your glasses. And it's so, we've never had something like this before. And there is that really fun side to the gadgetry behind all of this. And there's a moment, though, that I had totally forgotten about, which kind of feeds into my like, wow, maybe these movies should do a little more violence like this. Emilio Estevez, man. That guy gets like, not even just crushed by an elevator, but spiked through the face as he gets crushed by an elevator. And rewatching that, I was like, dude, we were all kind of looking around, we're like, this is hardcore. I was like, wow, that you definitely don't see stuff like that happening in the movies. At least now. I mean, Leah Seydoux got kicked out of the Burj Khalifa, but other than that, I'm like, no one else has really suffered something that crazy. And so there's moments throughout that whole film. I love Jean Reno. His attitude throughout the whole film is just hilarious. And, it really does feed into that sleight of hand, I've got the disc here. Who's got the disc? I've got it there. And it's fun. And I like Ving Rhames, I think, a little bit more than the other supporting cast in there. But it balances between, and I feel like it's because De Palma's at the helm, every time Tom Cruise is in the shot, it looks like, this is 1995. This is
he's
present day.
He's like
then,
20 years, 30 years younger.
I know, but then, and I'm blanking on who plays his counterpart, John Voight's wife. Every time the lens is on her, it looks like I'm watching some 70s De Palma movie because it looks like there's like a little blur on the film and her face just looks so much softer. And the way she kind of speaks is very, they're not quite femme fatale, but I'm like, there's definitely spy vibes that I was getting from it the whole time. And I was like, I know what movie she's from and what movie they're putting her in here. But I understand it. It set up the entire series. I'd always seen the gif or the video of him being lowered, catching the sweat on the glove before it drops down with the lasers. There's some really, really iconic moments. But another weird thing I have maybe about going back and revisiting these after watching the newer series, some of it's the music too. They've gotten really good with the music, just in the sense of how they can tell the story. Michael Giacchino is probably my favorite composer that's done any of these movies. Hans Zimmer's was very good, but there is just something about the energy that they can create with that theme. And so as it's evolved over time, I'm like, okay, now we're feeling full Mission Impossible. I don't know. There's just a feeling. It's like, I know where it started, difference. And it's nice to know where it started, but I prefer, I think, some of the more modern.
I get it. I totally get it. I mean, this comes on the heels of the TV show, and I don't want to go too deep into it because this is actually Patrick and I's next.
I haven't seen the TV show, and that, here I am doing my homework, and I'm like, Mission Impossible, based off the TV show.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I don't think most people did. I grew up in the era, so like I did, and I felt like I won't give away some of the things we're gonna talk about on our main episode, but like, there's really some interesting things they did with it. I personally just love it because I love De Palma's style, and I think it's so unique that it stands out amongst everything else. Now, some of the CGI like definitely doesn't hold up. Like when the plane crashes, or not a plane, the like helicopter
in the tunnel.
There's some gnarly looking stuff that they do some similar things in Dead Reckoning.
Of its time,
and if you compare the two pieces on a train, it's like whoa. So yeah, it's a product of its time, but it uses masks incredibly well. It's the first time, so it's not overused, and their twists are really good and interesting. And yeah, I adore it for mainly because of the being in the original and because of it being so stylish. And everybody went rogue after this. It was like every single movie has somebody go rogue, but this was the first, so it didn't feel overused. But I get some of the criticisms of it. So I would put in the next spot Dead Reckoning Part 1.
I would agree that would be kind of my next jump. It would be. It would be kind of right there in the middle of the pack.
So Mission Impossible is like my number 2. So I understand we're gonna have to give a little here, and I get that you are representing this modern run very strongly, so that's okay. I will allow it to slip to 4, but I can't let it be 5. Like I can't put it all the way down there. I just can't.
I can live with that. I can put Dead Reckoning.
We can do Dead Reckoning next at 5.
I could live with that.
Okay, so we'll do Dead Reckoning at 5, Mission Impossible at 4, and that leaves us 3 movies, which most people consider to be the 3 best, I think. I think a lot of people, older people like me, will agree about Mission Impossible 1, but these 4 were always, I think, going to be the top 4, in my opinion. In some way or form, like Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, and Fallout are the cream of the crop.
Mm.
So... Number 3. What do we have left? Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, and Fallout. I would put Fallout at number 3 personally. There's the face. There's the face.
All right. You know what? I was like, we could either go 1, 2, 3 right here real quick. Or... Okay. All right. You're only one off from where I would put
okay, so what is
Fallout.
Your 1, 2, 3 then?
I think my 1, 2, 3 would probably be Ghost Protocol, Fallout, and then Rogue Nation. And the 2 and 3, Rogue Nation and Fallout, it's interesting. I'd seen Rogue Nation probably more. It was one that I showed more people as well, probably. Whether it's Henry Cavill reloading the guns, creating a new pocket on his shirt and a mustache, and just crazy helicopter fights and all of that. I mean, it's a freaking fantastic movie. And then the other day I watched Rogue Nation again for the first time in forever. And the entire opera scene, I just, really enjoy. And, it's really creative in its use of some of that technology. I'm pulling apart this trumpet, and each little piece is going to turn into what will eventually become a rifle. And the creativity behind that, and, kind of setting up the syndicate as well. And obviously introducing us to Elsa. I really was surprised by how much I enjoyed that one again. I knew I liked it. Then, after watching Avatar, The Way of Water again, this whole who can hold their breath longer competition. It's like there is something totally to be said for why you shoot underwater and why it makes a difference in how the action ends up looking. So that whole sequence when he's down in the turbine is just awesome. He's getting knocked around and trying to swim his way back. And I loved it. But Fallout, I don't know, that whole ending to Fallout just gets so freaking crazy. And I'm just like I'm on the edge of my seat for that whole back 30 minutes or so. Henry Cavill just holding holding this giant gun, shooting at crews in his helicopter. I mean, there's some awesome sequences there. But I will say, with these 3 or 4 movies as of late, I think a common gripe that you've kind of shared as well is just like, oh no, how many masks can we use? Or by the time you're at the 7th movie, I feel like I've seen some of this before. It's like, oh no, this thing didn't finish printing. I'm like, how many times have I seen that? How many times in a Mission Impossible movie does the same thing happen where they're like, shoot, looks like we got to go back to basics, And I guess maybe you almost expect it now, but Ghost Protocol, I probably saw that. I was doing the math the other day. I think I saw it 4 or 5 times in IMAX when it came out. And that was partially fueled by my love of Christopher Nolan and the fact that certain IMAX screenings were going to show you the first 8 minutes of The Dark Knight Rises.
The Dark Knight Rises, yeah.
The whole Bane plane sequence that they'd shot. And so obviously I wanted to see Mission Impossible because I was like, this looks pretty good. And I was younger at the time for sure, where I'm like, I definitely hadn't watched the first 3, I don't think. I mean, if I had, I'd only been probably bits and pieces. But that movie was just the perfect packaging of spy, thriller, this sense of family with this group who just have such an enjoyable dynamic and repartee. Paula Patton. That was one where I'm like, is she in the other movies too? No. I'm like, I really like her in that movie. I think she works super well in the group with them all. Simon Pegg is just aces in that film. And, he was hot at that time too. That's like Star Trek prime time Simon Pegg, who just was firing on all cylinders. And the mask stuff's great. Tom Cruise running through the desert, the Burj Khalifa. I mean, there are just so many moments in that film that are exciting, entertaining, emotionally gripping, frustrating sometimes, and then just very aware of itself, in these moments where it's like, okay, you know what? The only way down to the case is buckling myself in this car, driving off the lift, and mission success. Mission success. Come on. It's brilliant. And I read these stories where I think it was Macquarie who'd said it. He was like, they brought me on to supervise for the script for Ghost Protocol. And it was like, we need you to help kind of figure out where we need to go, what the problem is. And he's like, the problem is you're writing Tom Cruise out of the movie. They were going to go with Jeremy Renner and kind of like he's going to be our new Ethan Hunt, essentially. And I always thought Renner was really great in that movie, too. And I think that's like a role or a type of role where he maybe is best at. He could do a couple types of leading man, but I buy him way more kind of in that role of like government oversight, like, you know what, I'm with you, and I know we need to do this, but I'm between a rock and a hard place here, Ethan. And there's just so many moments of pure popcorn movie, and Brad Bird is just a genius. And so that paired with Michael Giacchino's score as well. I mean, just top to bottom. There's no way it's not my favorite Mission Impossible movie.
So those are great reasons. All of that. So you said Ghost Protocol, Fallout, Rogue Nation, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Which is the exact opposite of mine.
No!
That's awesome. That's awesome. I knew that was going to happen. So I'll just say, I agree with almost all of your reasoning. You're nailing the things I love. I love Ghost Protocol because of the set pieces. I'll be the bad guy here, and I'll kind of call out the negatives of most of these, since you just highlighted all the positives pretty well.
We got to be able to take the good and the bad, so hit me.
My reasons for Ghost Protocol being below the other two are simply because I feel like the Burj Khalifa is such an incredible moment, and it is still the best set piece in the entire series. And I think the movie can't hold up to that afterward. I feel like it drags a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I check out when I get why you like the whole car sequence thing, but when Tom Cruise starts getting beat up by a scientist, I just can't get behind it. I'm like, why is this scientist literally kicking your butt? He's like got a dad bod, and he's hand to hand, he's beating you up, and it was a weird thing for me. And like, those are like the nitpicks for me.
Sure.
And also, I just didn't love the team quite as much as I have the other teams overall. Now, I agree with you. Renner is great in this. I loved him in that role as well. And I would not have wanted him to be Ethan Hunt or the next like leading guy. I think he's perfect as part of the team. I actually missed him when he went away.
Oh, totally.
In Fallout. He's gone, right? In Fallout? Yeah. Fallout's the one where he disappears. So I missed him in that. But yeah, that horrible end fight specifically for me was like a bit. It ended the movie with a sour note instead of like the biggest high.
And then you get the shot of Seattle Pier, which is definitely not in Seattle.
Yeah, but I like that we're trying to be in Seattle. I'm okay with that. Then for Fallout, I love everything about it except the ending. I think that once. Like the moment of Henry Cavill chasing him in the helicopter, like you said, with the gun, like those are some just amazing, amazing scenes. Once the helicopters crash, again, these are the moments in the Mission Impossible series. This is a reoccurring thing for me where when it gets cartoony, I'm like, we went too far. like nothing about that is remotely believable what happens at the end of that movie. And like
Sure.
it kind of like devolves into the whole very old trope of like, we gotta stop the timer before we blow it up. And it's like you've got these competing things where I was invested in the Benji and his wife trying to like disarm bombs. Like to me, like that was amazing. But like then you've got this crazy battle going on and people hanging off of a cliff, and I mean it's fun to some extent, but like it kind of didn't quite click as well for me with the rest of it. Rogue Nation is my favorite, primarily because it to me is the perfect balance of a Mission Impossible movie. So like I think it hits a high. It doesn't have quite the highest highs in the series, but it doesn't have any lows for me. It is just across the board, top tier, all the way through with, introducing Rebecca Ferguson. And I think because of her introduction and then also because Jeremy Renner's in it, it's my favorite overall team composition, and the team composition that I think all gets to shine without them being too big.
Sure.
Once we hit Fallout, we start throwing in more named actors, and we start really expanding on star power. And so the other thing about Rogue Nation that I think I really don't have any notes negative wise, but because I love the plot. It's the introduction of the Syndicate. It is fascinating idea. You've got Sean Harris, and my gosh, that guy is he's amazing.
Great motorcycle chase.
In the
middle, I'd forgotten about that, and I was watching that. I'm like, God, this is awesome.
What they're trying to accomplish, to me, is the heart of a Mission Impossible movie. I like them less when it's all about stopping world domination, i.e. the AI or a nuclear bomb, and more about when it's like, we got to prevent this guy from getting information that he could use to out the world's operatives, which is going to change the game for the special intelligence communities. And so for me, it's the best. Obviously, we love all three. I will.
We can
go. We don't need to go Rogue Nation number 1 because I understand that I'm like very rare in my placement of that.
I could make an argument for it because I'm with you on the end of Fallout in the sense of you've got two very different competing things going on, and there's also moments where, obviously we suspend a lot of disbelief sometimes in these films. Going back to Ghost Protocol, though, there's a moment where everybody had the same exact thought in the theater when he comes back through the window with the fire hose and hits his head right on the... I'm like, now you're dead. You're dead.
Gone.
That's mega death. There have been a couple things where I'm like, how are you... There's a moment in Dead Reckoning, I won't say what it is, but it's so unexpected, and I was like, are you okay? Like, how are you getting back up? But you're right. Rogue Nation, I think, is a little less cartoony in that same sense, and that back end of trying to trap Sean Harris. There was, watching it again, I think, really gave me the full circle for the film itself, though, too, from how it starts and how it kind of connects in the end, just with Sean Harris and his intro to Ethan Hunt, and then how Ethan ends with him in a box.
Great point. Like, the ending of these films being an action set piece versus something that took ingenuity and was a carefully calculated setup and capture. I guess there's something so much more rewarding to me when that happens than just because, I mean, plenty of movies give me cool action set pieces, but when he realizes it and starts shooting the glass, and dude, the look to see a villain go from so cold and calculated, calm, and like just perfect tone and demeanor the whole way through, and for 1 second, then he's rattled because he realizes he got outsmarted, and it's chilling to me in like such a great way, but. Anyway, I will give you Ghost Protocol simply because I think like we're doing this for us, but I also think there is such a Ghost Protocol hive that exists.
I could go Rogue, or not Rogue, sorry, yeah, Rogue at 2 for sure.
I will
Fallout
take that.
at 4.
I will take that.
And we can put MI1 at 3.
Wait, MI1?
Or wait, because I was trying to remember, where did you have MI1?
Well, I mean, I have
MI1, Mission Impossible.
I have it at 2, but I was willing to give you 4 because it and Fallout, I love both a lot. So I'm okay with 4. If I get Rogue Nation at 2, I can live with that because it's my favorite. So I'm okay with this. I'm okay with first. So I'm okay with. So this is gonna be the final order. So it's Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, Fallout, Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning Part 1, Mission Impossible 3, Mission Impossible 2. Can you live with that?
Only until I figure out your breakdown for the Daniel Craig James Bonds. I feel like that could be
I don't know if you
that could be a really another interesting foray.
It really would, because there's one that people hate that there's 2 that people don't like that I love. So
that's promising to hear, because I tell you, thinking about Dead Reckoning, just when you'd mentioned going analog earlier, I think back to Skyfall and just this idea of like, all right, if we got to be off the grid and if you got to go old school, whether it's booby trapping or whatever, there's something really enjoyable about going that route and traveling down the road less traveled in terms of telling your action story or how we're going to make our way back. It's interesting to see Dead Reckoning as low as it is in our group. But again, these films, they're all enjoyable. You could sit down and watch any one of these, be really well to massively entertained, and feel confident in your decision to watch these.
Absolutely. Well said. We'll end on that because that's exactly what I think. This is a movie you want to go see no matter what. And I think I said it earlier, but it is a franchise that it's so much better overall in quality than most other franchises have ever been able to achieve. So a movie being 5th in this one is not the negative thing that it might be in some other series. Don't think that.
There was one last thing I just wanted to mention. I'd seen people talking about it on Twitter and online, and just the idea that these movies have really evolved with other action franchises that have evolved throughout the last 20 or so years, whether it's some of the Fast and Furious movies in terms of some of the stunt work they're able to do with cars, some of just the flat-out action that we're seeing now, hand-to-hand combat, with the rise of John Wick and all these stunt choreographers taking their shot at directing, moving through Daniel Craig, James Bond. For sure, there's tons of inspiration that they kind of take there. But this franchise just keeps finding a way to tell maybe a slightly similar story to what we know, but showcase it in a way that, even if familiar, is probably done better than what we're thinking about while watching it. I mean, immediately the Fast and Furious reference that you made right after the movie ended, it was like, dude, this is night and day. They need to hire whoever does the car work for these movies.
So much different. Oh, man. Well, thank you for doing this. This has been awesome. It's been a blast. I've had a great time with it. And I'm grateful that I got to talk through these with you, man.
Dude, no, thank you for having me. This is, first time doing something of this nature. And I mean, you're incredibly prepared, cool as a cucumber. I'm like, this was, it's that cool way of feeling like, I'm talking with a friend right now. I'm like, it doesn't feel NPR level voices or anything like that. But no, thank you for the opportunity to do this. And thanks again for helping get the kick in my butt to just get back into this whole thing, man. Since April, I was looking, I was like, I guess that's only been like 3 months that I've been back reviewing and doing this in a more consistent capacity. But I mean, truly, thank you again for just helping me get back into the world and getting rebit by the bug.
Happy to do it. We'll tell people where they can find the plethora of reviews that you have put out since April, once again, in case they forgot.
Yes, sir. At nicktiffany.com. That's going to be the main hub for everything from blog style written reviews and then podcast as well as some interviews and different older things like that. And then you can find me on anywhere that you podcast, Apple, Spotify, maybe not Stitcher anymore since Stitcher's going away, but you can find me on YouTube now as well. Just under everything will be under Nick Tiffany's movie reviews. So that, give me a little leeway with the website. I'm still working on the header. We're still dusting off some of the coding books, and I'm learning as I go along. So it'll look whole pretty soon.
It looks really good to me, so hopefully people will check it out. Be sure to subscribe to your podcast and your YouTube and all that good stuff as well. Follow you on social media? You got social media? You didn't mention
social
that.
Media, Facebook. I think we got a page set up for just Nick Tiffany's movie reviews on there. On Twitter, I'm Nick Tiffany95. And you'll probably see a lot of Justice League and
I was going to wonder if you were going to mention that. I wasn't going to say it.
Turn the retweets off, and then you'll get the actual content.
I love it.
You wouldn't be the only one who said that.
Okay, listeners. Well, that's it for this week on FF Plus. Hopefully you've enjoyed this and it has helped make your decision on whether or not you need to go see this movie. The answer is yes. So if your answer, if you came away with the answer of no, then I don't know. We did something.
Listen back wrong. Again.
Yeah, I think we failed. Otherwise, if you do see one of the films or the film that we talked about on this movie, it's late. If you do see one of the movies that we talked about on this podcast, any of the Mission Impossibles, hit us up. Let us know what you thought of our rankings on social media. Tell us where you disagree, because we know you probably will. And then also let us know what you thought of Dead Reckoning Part 1 once you get a chance to see that. As always, again, thank you for listening. I will be back soon. Until then, keep watching and keep feeling film.